Coming up, the McGirt decision is back in court. A look at Colorado's dark history, plus sports and arts. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Thank you for joining the ICT Newscast. Last weekend, some 400 Karankawa Kadla and their supporters organized protests across Texas. The organizers say they want to call attention to the expansion plans for an Enbridge oil terminal. It's already the largest crude export terminal in North America, potentially transporting as much as 1.5 million barrels of oil per day. In a statement, the Indigenous Environmental Network says thousands of sacred Indigenous artifacts remain where the expansion is planned. The organization also asks for, quote, accountability from Enbridge and Bank of America. Both organizations say they have environmental, social, and governance plans and are on track to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And you can read more on this story by going to our website at indiancountrytoday.com. Just search for the headline, The Economics of Climate Accountability. As some residents celebrated Australia's National Day on Wednesday, others held protests across the country. Australia Day signifies the 1788 landing of British convict ships in Sydney and the settlement that was then established by those on board. In the nation's capital, protesters marched towards Parliament House and called for the public holiday to be abolished. They argued that historical wrongs had been committed against the country's Indigenous people after the arrival of British ships in Australia. Aboriginal rights advocate Yvonne Weldon called for unity during her speech.
Before time began, we were here. We have always been, and we will remain. Regardless of whether you call this Invasion Day, Survival Day, or Australia Day, we need to heal, and we can only do this together.
In Melbourne, a statue of British explorer Captain James Cook was painted red by demonstrators. In Paraguay, the Indigenous Makah female football team is breaking barriers. In a historic first, the all-female team of the Makah Athletic Club will be participating in a championship game in March. The young Indigenous women of the Makah will be part of the regional league affiliated with the Paraguayan Football Association.
Yes, it's important because it's the first time we participate. Last year we didn't play, but this year we are, and we practiced well.
Most of the roughly 2,000 tribal citizens live in a 35-acre area in a city bordering the country's capital. In 2019, after the death of a respected leader, women were encouraged to form an all-female football team. The team's coach says the players are happy to be a part of this year's championship.
We are happy to play in the 2022 championship this year. We are going to celebrate because we are very happy.
The community sees the all-female team's participation in the championships as an advance for women and football. $180 million. That was the price tag for the expansion at the rebranded Gila River Resorts and Casinos. ICT correspondent Karina Dominguez was at the celebration and has all of the sights and sounds.
Back again. That's right.
The two-day celebration at Wild Horse Pass got underway with a sold-out Ludacris concert.
Feeling real good, too.
A drone show kicked off the festivities before the grand opening of Prime, a Shula's steakhouse. The restaurant turns into a nightlife lounge when it transitions to 11 at Prime. Live table games like craps, roulette, and baccarat are now offered, thanks to the renegotiated gaming compact.
We increased the wager limits, so the table limits have increased as well. And a lot of our guests have responded and said that they really don't need to go to Las Vegas because it is here in the Valley.
The compact also brought BetMGM sportsbooks to all 3 Gila River resorts and casinos.
I'm so proud of the team that I have here at Gila River and just thankful for the support that we get from our tribal leadership.
Gila River's newest casino is under construction and slated to open in 2023. In Phoenix, Karina Dominguez, reporting for ICT.
And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. When we come back, arts and sports. But first, the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation weighs in on the McGirt decision being back in court, and a look at Colorado's dark history. The U.S. Supreme Court announced it will reconsider the landmark case McGirt versus Oklahoma this spring. Cherokee Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. tells us what this means for Oklahoma tribes.
It's worth remembering what McGirt is really about at its core. And what McGirt is really about is whether the United States ought to keep its promise to Indian tribes. That's a very basic proposition that I think all of Indian country supports. Really, the whole country should support, because this ought to be a country that keeps its word. So let's remember that McGirt was about the removal treaties that removed the 5 tribes from their original homelands to what is now Oklahoma. And the question was whether the Congress had done enough to break that promise when it imposed the state of Oklahoma over these tribal lands. The Supreme Court in July of 2020 said the Congress had not gone so far as to break those promises. That's really important. And so the governor, since that time, Governor Kevin Stitt, has really been on a mission to undermine the McGirt decision, to paint a picture of chaos that's breaking out on tribal lands. It's really a regressive way of thinking, and it's at odds with the facts. So to go back to the Supreme Court and ask the Supreme Court to have America break its promise, that was really breathtaking. But I'm so glad that the Supreme Court wouldn't even entertain the idea. And that's, I think, very important. So it reaffirms that the United States ought to keep its promise to Indian tribes. I think that's very important.
That was Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. When Rick Williams was researching his family's Cheyenne roots, he discovered an 1860s proclamation that called for Coloradans to kill hostile Indians and take their property.
That was part of a series of things that happened with the 1861 Fort Wise Treaty, which basically was designed to take Indian land and convert it into settler land. And because they were having problems doing it, they had to figure out ways to get rid of the Indians. And one of them was to declare war on them. That was the first proclamation. The second one was to kill Indians, individuals in the state. And of course, this led to the final thing, the Sand Creek Massacre. And basically after that, there were no Indians left in that part of the country.
The nonprofit group People of the Sacred Land created a commission to study the impacts of Colorado's dark history.
Our next step was to design a Truth and Restoration and Education Commission, similar to a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, except for we have to have conciliation before you can get reconciliation. And so the group of us, the People of the Sacred Land, worked together and independently raised money to create our own commission that's independent. And we are working towards identifying the truth and looking at a number of aspects. One of the very important ones is we want to know about the economic loss of our people in this state. And so we've commissioned a study to look at that data.
What data will the commission consider?
Our primary economy was the buffalo, and the buffalo was deliberately destroyed. All of the things that would have been part of our life are going to be evaluated for economic loss.
That was Lakota and Cheyenne scholar Rick Williams. A sense of loss is nothing new to Indigenous people, but how do we cope with this grief? Dr. Arnie Vainio talks about one of his patients whose heart was still broken years after the death of her child.
Her heart was broken. And it's not the natural order of things for a child to precede a parent in death. And, and it was extremely hard for her. She had a unresolved grief and unrecognized or disenfranchised grief, I think is the term for that, where um, people didn't appreciate her grief or didn't want to talk about her son because they thought it would remind her of his death, when in fact everything did. Birds flying outside, water running, he drowned. So anytime she saw water running, it reminded her of her son's death. And he was a child when he died, and stayed that age for her as her other children grew up, and uh, her friends quit eventually quit being her friends because they everything led to conversations about her son, and that's what she thought of. And in our visits, she did have chest pain and saw a cardiologist, and our visits were eventually primarily her talking about her son, and that was actually good for both of us.
Many tribes have rituals and ceremonies around the loss of a loved one.
Different tribes have different customs. An Ojibwe funeral is a beautiful and final ceremony, and the spirit of the deceased gets sent to be with our ancestors and to be part of our ancestors. This existence that we have is a temporary physical existence for our spirits um, to somehow improve and and develop. And we need to kind of keep that in mind. We're not here to make money and to buy things and to amass political power. And I mean, what we're really here for is for our spirits to develop. And and as people are grieving, they do miss people. Grief is the price we pay for love, and um, and it's the grief is a powerful emotion. Somebody's been with somebody for a long time. Couples that have been together for a long time, family members that have been together for a long time. Oftentimes, that person that's gone was half of somebody's memory, and it took on roles in the household and things that now have to be assumed by one person who's not ready to do it.
How can we support someone in their grief?
Well, it depends. There's people that mourn forever, and sometimes people get lost in that well of grief um, with substance abuse, and it's not uncommon. And I have I've been a physician on the Fond du Lac Reservation for the last 24 and some years, and in that time, more and more realized that our ceremonies and our traditions are really important to us. And a lot of that's been lost, or a lot of it's been missing. And one of the things that we do is we put tobacco out. For Ojibwe people, tobacco is a gift from the Creator for us to communicate with the spirits and communicate with the Creator. And it sounds like crazy stuff for a physician to be talking about, but I have um, I have patients put tobacco out, and people do it kind of at special times and when they're wanting something or they're lost. But really, the time to be doing that is every day, first thing in the morning, and that's what I do. So before I do anything else, I go outside and I put tobacco out every morning. And when you do that, and when I have patients do that, it every time they put some of that out, a little bit of the grief can go with that, and it can't be taken all at once. It's something that it's part of them. But if you can get a little bit of relief from that every single time, it adds up. And there are things to see out there. Our elders tell us that when you go outside and put tobacco out, that everything out there is trying to tell you something.
Dr. Arnie Bainio, thank you. When we come back, we'll turn to sports. Stay with us. There's plenty of athletes that Brent Cowie is following on a website he co-founded, indiansports.com. Let's talk basketball.
I love basketball season. It's our favorite time of the year for covering sports. You know, we get to travel all over the country to catch college and professional games, and every now and then we love to sneak in a high school game. But at the college level, which is our primary focus, as well as pro sports, Kelby Washington at the University of Oklahoma. She's a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and she's a freshman. And she earned her way as a starting point guard for the team, which is very rare. I mean, for any freshman to be named a starting point guard, but she's taken that role and she hasn't let go of it. And, you know, University of Oklahoma started out unranked through the season, but now they've found themselves as the number 14 ranked team in the nation. I got to watch her play recently at the University of Kansas against the Jayhawks, and they won the game. But she's just a phenomenal athlete. She's so quick, she's so fast, and she was named the Big 12 Freshman of the Week a few weeks ago. So, you know, not only is she getting, you know, accolades of starting, but also Big 12 conference awards. She was also named the National United States Writers Basketball Association Newcomer of the Week as well for that same week. So she's doing really, really good things on the court. I had a chance to sit and visit with her after the game, and you know, she's just really excited about her opportunity and being a member of the University of Oklahoma's women's basketball team. And one thing I think, if people get a chance to watch her, University of Oklahoma has a new head women's coach this year. Their style of play is res ball. There's no ifs and buts. They play res ball. They get up and down the court and they shoot a lot of threes and play really hard on defense. Now on the men's side of the house, we have Raekwon Evans, who's from the Crow Nation. He's playing for Florida State University out of the ACC conference, and he is a senior, super senior as they're called, because he had a COVID year and he took his COVID season. So he's starting to really come alive the second half of the season. He had 2 big games where he made some clutch free throw shots to win the games. Last week it was against Maryland, where he sank 2 free throws with 0.8 seconds to ice the game for Florida State in the victory. And just recently he helped Florida State push Duke University into overtime with his free throws with 3 seconds left in the game. And then in overtime, he made the winning shot with like 10 seconds to go.
Let's switch to football as we're in the middle of the playoffs.
As far as our native athletes that are in the NFL, that are in the playoffs, we have they're part of some really good teams. You know, first I'll start with Austin Corbett, who's from the Walker River Paiute tribe. And he's a starting offensive lineman for the Los Angeles Rams. And he played collegiately at Nevada, and he was drafted 2 years ago or 3 years ago now. And he's doing really well. Like I said, he's a starting lineman for the Rams, who are playing really well. And I know the Arizona fans don't want to hear about the Rams, but but he did really well that game. You know, did his job. You know, being an offensive lineman isn't the most glamorous type of position, but he did really well in his position. And, you know, going across the NFL, it's a couple other native athletes to keep an eye on in the playoffs is Creed Humphrey and James Winchester. They're both members of the Kansas City Chiefs football team. Creed is a starting center for the offense, and the James Winchester is a long snapper for the team as well. So he's the guy that hikes the balls for extra points and punts and stuff like that. James is a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and Creed is a member of the Citizen Band of Potawatomi Nation in Oklahoma as well. And obviously the Chiefs have, you know, all-world quarterback Patrick Mahomes. So their offense gets really going up and down the court. I mean, up and down the field, and they're just really exciting to watch. And we've been able to interview both James and Creed at various times, and they're really humble type of people, and they're just great to visit and chat with, and they're always keeping up with what I'm doing with Indian sports too. So that's kind of neat from my perspective of our athletes being a fan of what we do and stuff like that.
That was Brent Cowie from IndianSports.com. After 17 years, Chris Wondolowski retired, but now he's in the front office of his former team, the San Jose Earthquakes. I asked him what stands out to him in his career.
I have a couple. One representing the country in the World Cup down in Brazil, I think was amazing and something that will always stick with me. But winning the championships, winning the trophies. I was able to win 2 MLS Cup championships, then also 2 supporter shields, which are the best record during the regular season for the season. And so very honored for both of those. And I love those.
Tell us more about the World Cup.
It's amazing. To be honest, I get goosebumps, just thinking about it, to represent your country and to be, one of the 23 players that, your country is representing in the World Cup, and to be in the final there, to be in the World Cup finals there. It's amazing down in Brazil. And so it was just an absolute, you could feel the energy and feel the buzz around the city. It was around the country, and it was anytime any game was going on, it was a complete standstill. And I love playing our games, but it was down in Brazil, and when Brazil was playing, you could hear cannons going off when they scored. It was complete mayhem, and those are some of the memories that really stick with me. And it was a true honor.
Wondo offers this advice for young players.
My advice, and a little bit cliche, but there are many paths to your final goal. And, some are the straight, short, direct route, and some are the long, windy roundabout. But usually those are the most scenic, the most beautiful, and the ones that you remember the most. And so that was kind of my journey. And that's the thing that you always have to remember, is there'll be obstacles in the way of your path and of your road, but it's how you overcome them, how you get past them, and how you continue on that path.
Chase Salinas cutting inside, looking for Wondo!
That was Kiowa soccer player Chris Wondolowski. A new film called Purple Flower Girl features the artwork and life of Jean LaMarr. It's directed by Sonevi Spoonhunter, a former ICT fellow.
So the short film really does chronicle her life, up from her rural upbringing in Susanville up into her current position as an artist. She continues her art from her home in Susanville on the reservation there. It's actually called a rancheria in that area. But anyway, I filmed with her, and something that I really liked about her is just the parallels that we had in our lives. We're both Northern Paiute women who grew up in rural California. And, she also went to the University of California, Berkeley. And when I was studying there, I would always walk by this park. It's called the Ohlone Park. And there in the middle of the park is a mural that she did. And I had no idea at the time that she had completed this mural, and it's titled The Ohlone Journey. And so, being in that space, walking by that, it really comforted me. And just knowing that she's the one behind the work really, made me feel honored to capture the story.
What message does LaMarr transmit in her artwork?
In the film, she has a quote that it really resonated strongly with me. And in that quote, she says, "Question authority, don't take things as is." And that's something that she attributes to her studies at UC Berkeley. And I think that she really does that. She questions authority. She goes in and creates these beautiful pieces of artwork that often have purple in them. Just a side note here, that Purple Flower Girl is her Indian name. And so you can see that color spread across all of her works and her pieces of art. And so just to have that, drawing the viewer in with these beautiful colors, but then also has a very strong message for the viewer, and really, prompts these questions about, we've been talking about, colonialism.
The film and the exhibition start this weekend and runs through May at the Nevada Museum of Art. Let's take a look.
I was influenced by the beauty of the mountains and the skies and all natural things that are going on here. Well, what I like to do is get down into their spiritual soul. What is the heart of the matter? What is their needs? What do they want? And put it out there aesthetically. And then they can learn how to grow with that. They can grow. I use my artwork in a beautiful way so that I can bring people into their artwork, but yet I have a message for them. And that message has to do with how I feel our Indian people are being treated. There was a stereotype that we're vanished Americans. We're gone. There's no more.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. Glad you could join us. For more news and updates, visit IndianCountryToday.com. From the ICT Newsroom, stay safe, my relatives. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.